Welcome or welcome back. My name is Grace. Today is Wednesday, June 11th. I'm on my way to the office. It is almost 6:30 in the morning, so I have to get going. So right now, if you do not know, California is kind of in a state of national emergency. We have protests, riots. The National Guard is here and it's supposed to be increased. All this started because a lot of immigrants who are doing things the right way and checking in on their court hearings, whatever, are getting snatched outside, thrown into the back of vans. So that is what started off this protest, and we're not supposed to be upset about that. So Trump has called in the National Guard. Of course, if you go to print news outlets, you see different things, but that is what is going on. So right now, if a van rolls up with a bunch of men with tactical gear from Amazon that don't look like law enforcement and they order me to get into the back of the van, I'm supposed to comply with that. But my contract says I am in office Wednesdays and Fridays, so off I go. So just to touch on the books that I want to start listening to, I actually want to reread a couple of books that I read like decades ago. So the first one is called The History of Unknown Americans by Christina Henriquez. This is a book that I have been wanting to reread. It is YA, so it's not my typical genre. But I remember enough of the story that I feel like I can follow it on audio, and it was available in my library's Libby. So what this book is about is you have this Mexican family that has immigrated to Delaware the right way. The father is on a work visa. And from what I remember, the mother is very proud to be the right kind of immigrant, the one that did her paperwork. And she looks down on people that don't. And she's constantly like, they make us look bad and whatever. And as you see this family trying to get integrated in the community, you see the racism they face and all these other things. And I don't remember exactly what happens, but the father, something happens where I think he either gets let go or something at work, and they are supposed to go back to Mexico, but one of them has a medical problem that happened. I don't remember exactly what happened. But because of that, they have to make the choice to either go back to Mexico where there is no treatment, or they become the wrong kind of immigrants that overstay their welcome. So I don't know. I remember that book. I read it when it came out, like back in 2014. So I was like a few years out of high school, but it kind of just stuck with me because my parents are legal immigrants. I was born here. I am a legal immigrant. And I remember when I was like under 10 years old, I made some kind of joke and I was just repeating something I heard. And my mom, that was like one of the few times that she was like really, really stern with me, like where it mattered. She told me not to make those kinds of jokes, that just because we did things the right way doesn't make us better than anybody else. And like, it's not even like I meant it. But she was just telling me, like, back then, whenever they immigrated, like back in the 70s, she was just like, we were lucky. We didn't do things the right way, like, or whatever. It's just that we were actually lucky. Like, our paperwork went through back when there wasn't a bunch of information at your fingertips. You didn't know um the other language. It wasn't easy for them to figure out English to trust the right people. They had to go to an immigration lawyer. Luckily, they picked one that actually did the paperwork correctly and didn't rip them off back before Google reviews. And she was just like, it was just the right time, the place. We knew the right people. We hired the right people. So we're lucky. We're not just like, anything else. So yeah, that is that book. The other book is called The Barbarian Nurseries by Hector Tovar. This book, I think it came out in 2011. So in this book, you have this well-off white family in Orange County who employ an immigrant woman to take care of the kids and clean the house, and their household runs smoothly because of her. And they do acknowledge that, and everybody's happy. She doesn't really speak a whole lot to them, but she does take care of the kids. The kids love her. And one day there is some kind of miscommunication between the parents where they each assume that the other would be home. I don't remember what it was, but long story short, this woman is supposed to go home and she has something where she has to go home for in LA, and the parents don't come home. And these are two small children and she doesn't know what she is supposed to do. She tries to contact them, they don't answer. So she just doesn't know what to do. So she takes them home with her and she hopes that they will contact her and it'll get sorted out. But she's just at a loss of what to do. Meanwhile, once the parents come home and they realize the nanny's gone, the kids are gone, they freak out. They call the police. they start like a whole like kidnapping thing. And then as they're talking, they realize there was miscommunication. They're like, wait, you weren't home? You weren't home? I thought, whatever. They realize they made a mistake. But at this point, they have media, like national media attention on the situation. So they don't want to be caught for child endangerment or child neglect or whatever the case may be. But they don't want to get her in trouble, but they don't want to get in trouble. So that's what I remember from that book. From what I remember, The History of Unknown Americans is I think it was like a 9-hour audiobook, and the Barbarian Nurse series is about 16 hours. So today, Wednesday, is the one day me and my best friends, like in office days, overlap. So I don't have a whole lot of hope that I will get through a lot. But hopefully on my drive there, I will get started on one of them. I think I'm going to start with The History of Unknown Americans just because it's shorter. It's like 9 hours. So I'll check in later. All right, it is now Monday, so it's almost a week later, not quite, and I'm just going to wrap this video up good because I feel like I have a lot to say about this book. I loved it. I read this in 2014, so about 11 years ago, and I don't remember all the details of this book, but I remember it leaving a good impression on me, where if I was like, somebody asked me for a recommendation for a long time, I would recommend this, but then once my memory got foggy, it kind of just fell off. But it's such a good book, and I want to go into why. And I know I look a little greasy. It's Monday, it's hot. I went out I went out of the house. I took Anna to IKEA, and so excuse this. But let me get into the book. So the central theme in this book, the plot that you're following, is the Rivera family. So they were in Mexico, and they were living this great life. So you just have Alma, who her POV comes up a lot in the book. That's the main one that you're following. Her husband, Arturo, and their daughter, Maribel. And I think I thought this was YA because of the cover, and I know Maribel's story was a huge part of this, but you're primarily following their family story through Alma's perspective. So in Mexico, Arturo was he had his own construction business. So they were doing fine. They didn't have aspirations of moving to America. And Alma describes all these scenarios where she was envisioning their future, where eventually Maribel gets married and has kids and brings the kids over and they watch novellas and then eventually they go home. So she just had like her whole life planned out and she was excited about it. But one day when Maribel's about like 14 or so, she falls from a ladder at Arturo's job site and she suffers this brain injury. And Alma describes how Maribel was always this beautiful little girl. She was growing into a beautiful young woman. Boys were having crushes on her. And after this, nobody knew how to talk to her. And it seemed like the boys were embarrassed because now she is somebody with a brain injury. She's mentally deficient, basically. That's how they view her. But the doctor tells her, you can go to Mexico City. There are schools that can help Maribel, but the best schools are in the United States. So because of that, Alma applies for a work visa for Arturo and she gets it. So they're so excited to help Maribel, although Arturo is the one that has reservations. Why can't we try here? Why can't we try Mexico City first? But Alma has this sense that she has lost her daughter and this is her only child. She cannot have children anymore, but she feels like there was a before and an after. And I think it's something where if you have a child with a disability, it's something you always think about, who would they be outside of this disability, or what would I lose if they didn't have this disability? Iggy is 13 right now, and he's always been such a sweet, cuddly kid. And when he was little, I didn't think anything of it because this book came out in 2014. I already had Iggy. He was about 3 years old. But now that he's 13, I do think of that. How different would he be now? Because Anna's only a year older and she's gone through so many phases of being really affectionate and then not, and then coming around. So Alma is going through that because she feels like she lost her daughter and she wants to, whatever she needs to do to get her daughter back, that is what they will do. And obviously going to Delaware isn't a ideal situation for them because they don't speak the language. They weren't planning on it. But they moved to Delaware and you see the culture shock immediately as they're going into the apartment complex. The driver passes by an old television set and he's like, hey, do you guys want it? And they were just like, isn't it stealing? We can't steal. And he's just like, in America, people just throw things away that are still perfectly good. And by the time they're driving along the roads, they pick up a mattress and all these things that are just perfectly good, just discarded. So they arrive to their apartment complex, and it is all these different people. All these people from different Latin American countries. So the POVs in this book, so you have the central theme of the Rivera family, or central characters, I should say. And they'll mention a different character, like let's say the landlord, and it'll be like this small interaction, nothing big. And then you'll hear his story of how he immigrated and how he had plans to be a boxer and he lost a bet because it was like, okay, if you win this, you can go on and like pursue your boxing career. And if you lose, you have to be a landlord. And he's like, well, here I am. So you follow all these POVs, and they are just so good because a lot of these people like immigrated legally and some of them illegally, but you see the circumstances in which they had to leave what they knew. The other main family that you follow a lot is the Toro family. And they were Panamanian and they loved Panama. They described, I forgot which, I think it was the wife's POV. You actually hear from both of them, but how they fell in love and how they were always at the beach and everything they loved about their culture. But then when the revolution started, all the unrest and the times that they were held up at bus and where they didn't think they would live to see the next day. So they had to leave their country behind, even though they didn't want to. And then you have people that cross illegally and they're just kind of like laughing about it, like, whatever, like, there's more money. I was offered this or that. There's this one guy, I think he was from Nicaragua, and he was saying how he was held hostage in a house once he crossed the border, because that is something that happens a lot. People pay these, like, they call them coyotes, to smuggle them across the border, and they agree on a certain amount of money. But when they cross, they hold them hostage in a halfway house sort of situation where they're just like in the dark in a room crowded with a bunch of people until they extort money from a family member. The only other way this guy found out of it was to sell drugs. It was like either he's held there indefinitely because he knows his family doesn't have the money and he doesn't know what they'll do to him, or he runs drugs. So he chose to do that. So just like all these stories going around, Maribel starts her school and they're each adjusting to their new roles. Alma thinks like, oh, maybe I will learn English. She goes to like a adult school where I don't think she actually continues lessons. I kind of forgot, but it's like late and people are, my computer's still going off with Teams, if you recognize that sound. So we're following their story, and I felt like all the different POVs were interesting. There's even a Puerto Rican, which I never really thought about how complicated Puerto Rico's ties to the United States, because I'm on the West Coast and Puerto Ricans tend to be on the East Coast. So that whole thing, let me see what else I thought. Okay, so eventually and Alma is very proud of herself that she did things the right way. She applied for the work visa, they got their paperwork, and then they came to Delaware. So she kind of had this air about her. Like, you don't hear it in the beginning, and I was thinking I had imagined it, but then it comes out. But then Arturo is fired from his job. And he tells her, like, oh, it's because they want illegal immigrants because they don't have to pay them as much as they pay me. So she's just like, they can't do that to you. And he's like, yes, they can. Like, this is what they wanted to do. Like, they wanted to do this like little publicity stunt of hiring people with work visas, but in the end, they're always going to hire illegal immigrants. They're always going to cut, margins and make more of a profit. And he's like, well, I have 30 days, like, or something like that to find another job so he can continue his work visa. But nobody wants to hire him with a work visa. They'll hire him as an illegal immigrant, but not, actually pay him what a citizen would get, or, abide by laws. So this takes place during Obama's first term. So, there's a lot of political talk about he was supposed to change things, that kind of thing. And then, so as the last days of the work visa are coming, she's just like, what are we going to do? We have to stay for Maribel. And he's like, okay, but we're going to be like everybody else that shouldn't be here, basically. And so obviously it brings up the topic of immigration, and it's just something that I personally never thought about. Like, the way I always thought about it previously to like this year, like recently, was you can't fault a country for wanting secure borders, but you also can't fault people for wanting a better life. And so it's like, there is no right answer, right? But this book being written so long ago, and what the current situation is that we see with the Trump administration, it just really brings home that America is built on unpaid or poorly paid labor. It was built on slavery, and then it was built with like sharecroppers, and it's always marginalized people taking jobs that nobody wants. And this happened back then with like hiring, like, and this happened like obviously in this book with Arturo trying to do things the right way, and people being like, no, we want immigrants that we can just pay like a fraction of the cost. And currently in the Trump administration, you have all these farmers shocked that their migrant workers aren't coming to work, and they're just like, oh my god, my business is going to go under, my farm is going to go under. I'm in LA, so this weekend, or this past week I should say, they were doing a lot of raids, and I don't live in like an agricultural area, so we saw it a lot in car washes. And it's like not a serious thing, but it's one of those things where it's just like there's a ghost town. All these people are saying they took their car to a car wash and it's closed because everybody either left or got picked up by ICE. And like, what's going to happen? Like Trump's going to make this big old show of how many people he deported, but America runs on immigrant labor, and it sucks, but it's the truth. So I don't know. It just brought that up. And I was also just thinking about how, especially now with COVID, with all these Americans being able to be more remote at work and going to different countries, like they don't get the same shit that immigrants got and are getting for coming here. You know what I mean? Everyone's just like, oh, like how do you adjust? Like how do you like it? Do you feel safe? Nobody is telling them I mean, there are a few people that are just like, hey, you're like, they don't see themselves as immigrants. They just see themselves as expats, and they just put this fancy little name on it when it's the same thing. And it's actually kind of a problem because I've seen in Mexico, a lot of people are complaining that a lot of people are getting priced out of their communities because all these Americans are coming with more money and houses are going up. Anyways, I am overheating right now. I'm sweaty. I want to turn my ceiling fan on. But obviously, I had a lot of feelings about this book, so I am glad I got them out. And I will see you in the next one. Here's my plan, just so if you care for my next video. I have been trying to get into The Boys by Ron and Clint Howard, and it's like I should just give it up. But my library had it like as a ebook. So I feel like, okay, maybe if I focus on the words, then I can get my footing in the book, because I have just picked up nothing from this book. And I am also reading Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So that'll be in my next video if you care, and I will see you in the next one.